The woman standing in the doorway of the general store had a baby strapped to her chest and defiance burning in her eyes. Though Ethan Foster could see the way her fingers trembled as she reached for the bag of flour on the shelf. It was the summer of 1878 in Fort Collins, Colorado, and the heat seemed to make everything shimmer with judgment. Katherine Langley had walked into Morrison's general store with her head held high. But Ethan watched as Martha Morrison physically turned her back when Katherine approached the counter. The silence that fell over the other customers was heavier than the summer air, thick with contempt and whispered scandal. Ethan had only been in town 3 weeks, having driven a herd north from Texas with his boss, rancher Douglas Carter. He knew enough about Katherine Langley to understand why the town treated her like poison. She had been married to Harold Langley, a respected banker, until she left him for another man. That man, a gambler named Jack Thornton, had gotten her with child and then disappeared into the night, leaving Katherine with nothing but shame and a baby girl. In a town like Fort Collins, where propriety mattered more than water in a drought, Katherine might as well have painted herself scarlet. "I can pay," Katherine said quietly, her voice steady despite the obvious hostility. She placed coins on the counter, enough to cover the flour, some dried beans, and a small tin of lard. Martha Morrison crossed her arms over her ample chest. "I do not serve women of your kind. Take your money and leave my establishment." The baby against Katherine's chest began to fuss, sensing her mother's tension. Katherine's jaw tightened, but she scooped up her coins with as much dignity as she could muster. Her green eyes swept the store, landing briefly on Ethan before moving away. She had dark auburn hair pulled back in a simple braid, and even in her worn calico dress, there was something striking about her, something that spoke of strength rather than defeat. Ethan made his decision before he could second-guess himself. "Madam," he called out, stepping forward, "I would be happy to purchase those items for you." Every head in the store turned toward him. Martha Morrison's face went red with indignation, and he heard someone mutter something about foolish cowboys who did not know better. Katherine herself looked startled, her green eyes widening as she studied him with obvious confusion. "You do not need to do that," Katherine said softly. "I will manage." "I know I do not need to," Ethan replied, picking up the item she had selected. "But I would like to. Mrs. Morrison, I will take these items, along with my own supplies." Martha Morrison looked like she had swallowed a lemon, but money was money, and Ethan was a paying customer. She rang up the purchases with sharp, angry movements, and Ethan paid without comment. He gathered everything into his arms and followed Katherine out of the store, stepping into the bright Colorado sunshine. Katherine had stopped on the wooden sidewalk, her back straight as a ramrod. When she turned to face him, there was no gratitude in her expression, only wariness. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "Now they will talk about you the same way they talk about me." Ethan set the supplies in her arms carefully, mindful of the baby. Up close, he could see that the child was maybe 4 months old, with wispy dark hair and eyes that were just beginning to show hints of hazel. The baby was staring at him with that unfocused intensity that infants had. "I have been talked about before," Ethan said with a slight smile. "I reckon I can survive it." "You are new in town," Katherine observed. "You do not understand what you have just done. In Fort Collins, choosing to help me is choosing to be cast out yourself." "Then I choose to be cast out," Ethan said simply. He touched the brim of his hat. "Ethan Foster, madam. I work at the Carter Ranch, about 5 miles north of here." Katherine studied him for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face for something he could not name. Finally, she nodded once. "Katherine Langley, and this is my daughter, Sarah." The baby made a small cooing sound, and despite the tension of the moment, Ethan found himself smiling. "She is a pretty little thing." "She is everything," Katherine said, and there was such fierce love in her voice that Ethan felt something shift in his chest. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Foster, but you should know that I do not need saving. I have been managing on my own, and I will continue to do so." "I do not doubt it," Ethan replied, "but sometimes managing alone is harder than it needs to be." Katherine's expression softened just a fraction before she rebuilt her walls. "Good day, Mr. Foster." She walked away down the street, her spine straight despite the weight of the supplies and the baby. Ethan watched her go, aware of the eyes on him from every window and doorway along Main Street. He had just aligned himself with the most scorned woman in Fort Collins, and there would be consequences. But as he watched Katherine disappear around the corner, heading toward the poor side of town where she apparently lived, he found he did not regret his choice at all. The next morning, Douglas Carter called Ethan into his office before breakfast. Douglas was a stern man in his 50s, weathered by years of ranching and dealing with stubborn cattle and even more stubborn men. He sat behind his desk with his fingers steepled, regarding Ethan with an unreadable expression. "I hear you made quite a scene in town yesterday," Douglas said. Ethan met his boss's gaze steadily. "I helped a woman buy some groceries, sir. I would not call that a scene. The woman in question is Katherine Langley. Do you know who she is? What she did?" "I know what people say she did," Ethan replied carefully. "I know she left her husband and took up with a gambler who abandoned her. I know she has a baby and no husband to provide for them. I know the town has decided she is not worth their Christian charity." Douglas leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. "You have got a smart mouth on you, Foster. That is going to get you in trouble." "With respect, sir, I believe it already has." A slow smile spread across Douglas's face, surprising Ethan. "You remind me of myself when I was younger, stubborn as a mule and twice as ornery." He paused, his expression growing serious again. "I am not going to tell you who you can or cannot help, but I will tell you this: the people in this town have long memories. If you keep associating with Katherine Langley, you will find yourself on the outside looking in. Ranching is hard enough without the community turning against you." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Douglas stood, walking to the window that overlooked his spread. "Katherine Langley made her choices. Whether they were right or wrong is not for me to judge. But this town has judged her, and they have found her wanting. You are young, Ethan. You have your whole life ahead of you. Do not throw it away on a woman you do not even know." Ethan considered his next words carefully. "My father used to say that you can judge a man's character by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. I reckon the same is true for how a town treats a woman who has fallen on hard times." Douglas turned from the window, his eyes sharp. "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was, sir. He died when I was 16, but I have tried to remember his lessons." They stood in silence for a moment, weighing each other. Finally, Douglas nodded. "Get to work, Foster, and for what it is worth, I hope your father's wisdom serves you well." Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan found himself thinking about Katherine Langley more than he probably should have. He went about his work on the ranch with his usual diligence, mending fences and breaking horses, and doing all the backbreaking labor that ranching required. But in the quiet moments, when he was riding alone across the grassland or lying in his bunk at night, his thoughts drifted to the woman with green eyes and a baby strapped to her chest. He went into town on a Saturday afternoon to pick up supplies for the ranch, and he saw her again. She was coming out of the small church at the edge of town, and from the look on her face, her visit had not gone well. Reverend Michael stood in the doorway behind her, his expression tight with disapproval, and Katherine was walking quickly, Her shoulders hunched as though she was trying to make herself smaller. Ethan guided his horse in her direction, dismounting when he reached her. Mrs. Langley. She looked up, startled, and he saw that her eyes were red-rimmed, though no tears fell. "Mr. Foster, I did not expect to see you again." "Fort Collins is not that big of a town," he said gently. "Are you all right?" Katherine glanced back at the church, and her expression hardened. "The Reverend has made it clear that I am no longer welcome at services. He said my presence is a disruption and a poor example for the other women of the congregation." Anger flared hot in Ethan's chest. "That is not very Christian of him." "No," Katherine agreed quietly, "but it is very human." She adjusted the cloth sling that held baby Sarah, who was sleeping peacefully despite the tension. "I should not have expected anything different. I knew what I was giving up when I left Harold." "May I ask why you did?" Ethan said, then immediately winced. "I apologize, that is none of my business." Katherine looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing whether to answer. Finally, she sighed. "Because Harold Langley was a good man on paper, but behind closed doors he was cold and cruel. He never struck me, but there are many ways to hurt a person without raising your hand. When Jack Thornton came to town, he made me laugh. He made me feel alive. I knew it was wrong, I knew what people would think, but I left anyway. I chose love over duty, or what I thought was love." Her voice grew bitter. "Jack showed his true colors soon enough. He wanted a woman to warm his bed, not a wife or a family. When I told him I was expecting, he left in the middle of the night, took everything of value I had brought with me and disappeared." "I am sorry," Ethan said, meaning it. "I am not," Katherine replied, and there was steel in her voice. "Because if I had stayed with Harold, I would not have Sarah. She is worth every moment of scorn and every door slammed in my face. She is worth all of it." Ethan found himself admiring her fierce love, her refusal to regret the choices that had led to her daughter. "Where are you staying?" "I have a small cabin on the outskirts of town. It is not much, but it is mine. I do washing and mending for the few people who will still do business with me. It is enough to keep us fed." "Barely," Ethan observed, noting her too thin frame and the worn state of her clothing. Katherine's chin lifted. "We manage, Mr. Foster. I told you before, I do not need saving." "What if I am not offering to save you?" Ethan said. "What if I am just offering friendship?" She looked at him with such surprise that it made his heart ache. How long had it been since someone had offered her simple kindness without expectation or judgment? "Why?" she asked. "Why would you want to be friends with me?" "You barely know me, and what you do know should warn you away." "Maybe I am a poor judge of character," Ethan said with a slight smile. "Or maybe I see something in you that the rest of this town is too blind to notice." "And what is that?" "Courage," he said simply. "Strength. A woman who loves her child more than she fears what people think of her. Those seem like fine qualities to me." Katherine's eyes filled with tears, and she blinked them back rapidly. "You are either the kindest man I have ever met or the most foolish." "Probably some of both," Ethan admitted. "May I walk you home?" She hesitated, and he could see the internal battle playing out across her face. Finally, she nodded. "All right, but you should know that being seen with me will not help your standing in this town." "I reckon my standing in this town is not worth as much as I thought it was," Ethan replied. They walked together through Fort Collins, and Ethan could feel the weight of every stare, every whispered comment. Mrs. Henderson pulled her daughter away when they passed, as though Katherine's shame was contagious. Mr. Thompson spat in the dirt and muttered something crude. But Ethan kept his eyes forward and his pace steady, matching Katherine's determined stride. Her cabin was indeed small, barely more than a single room with a rough stone fireplace and a few pieces of simple furniture. But it was clean, and there were wildflowers in a jar on the table, a small attempt at making the place a home. Katherine invited him in, settling Sarah in a wooden cradle that looked handmade. "Would you like some coffee?" she asked. "It is not much, but it is hot." "That would be nice, thank you." As Katherine prepared the coffee over the fire, Ethan looked around the cabin more carefully. There was a pile of mending in one corner, shirts and trousers that needed repairs. A washboard and bucket sat near the door. This was how Katherine survived, taking in the work that no one else wanted to do, the work that could be sent out without requiring face-to-face interaction with the Scarlet Woman of Fort Collins. "How old is Sarah?" Ethan asked, watching the baby sleep. 4 months and 3 days, Katherine replied, bringing him a chipped cup of weak coffee. "She is a good baby. She hardly cries even when I know she must be hungry." Her voice caught slightly on the last words. Ethan made a decision. "Mrs. Langley, the Carter Ranch always has more work than hands to do it. Would you be willing to take on washing for the ranch? We have 12 men including myself, and we could use someone to do our laundry. Mr. Carter pays fair wages." Katherine set down her own cup, her expression wary. "Did Mr. Carter send you here to offer this?" "No," Ethan admitted, "but I am sure I can convince him. We do need the help and you need the work. It seems like a fair arrangement to me." "And why would you do this for me?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Ethan said. "And because I have been where you are, maybe not exactly, but close enough. When my parents died, I was alone with nothing but the clothes on my back and a horse that was half lame. A rancher in Texas took a chance on me, gave me work when everyone else saw just another hungry orphan. I would not be here today if not for his kindness. Maybe this is my way of passing that along." Katherine's eyes searched his face, looking for deception or ulterior motive. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. "If Mr. Carter is willing, I will accept the work." "But I earn my wages, Mr. Foster. I do not take charity." "I would not insult you by offering it," Ethan replied. That evening, after the work was done and the men were settling in for supper, Ethan approached Douglas Carter again. The older man listened to his proposal with his usual stern expression, his weathered face giving nothing away. "You are asking me to hire Katherine Langley," Douglas said when Ethan finished. "I am asking you to hire someone to do work we need done. She happens to be Katherine Langley." Douglas rubbed his jaw, thinking, "My wife is not going to like this." "Your wife does not have to like it, sir. She just has to accept it. You have got steel in your spine, boy, I will give you that." Douglas sighed heavily. "All right, tell Mrs. Langley she can start next week." "But Ethan, this is on you. If there are problems, if the men complain, if my wife makes my life difficult, you are the one who answers for it." "Understood, sir. Thank you." As Ethan turned to leave, Douglas called after him. "You are sweet on her, are not you?" Ethan paused in the doorway. "I barely know her, sir." That was not an answer. "No, sir, I suppose it was not." Katherine started working for the Carter Ranch the following Monday, and true to Douglas's prediction, there were complaints. Mrs. Carter, a formidable woman named Beatrice, made her displeasure known in no uncertain terms. Several of the ranch hands grumbled about having their clothes washed by a woman of questionable morals. Though Ethan noticed, they stopped complaining once they had clean shirts for the first time in weeks. Ethan found excuses to be around when Katherine came to collect and deliver the laundry. She would arrive in the early morning with Sarah strapped to her back, load the dirty clothes into her wagon, and return them 2 days later, clean and neatly folded. They would talk while she worked, small conversations that gradually grew longer and more personal. He learned that she had grown up in Denver, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a seamstress. She had met Harold Langley when she was 19 and he was 27, and her parents had encouraged the match. Harold was stable and successful, everything a young woman should want in a husband. The wedding had been lovely. The marriage had been a slow suffocation. He wanted a perfect wife, Katherine told Ethan one morning as she sorted through dirty shirts. Someone who would smile at his colleagues and keep a perfect house and never have an opinion of her own. I tried to be that person for 3 years. I tried so hard. But every day I felt like I was disappearing, becoming less and less myself, until I did not recognize the woman in the mirror. "What changed?" Ethan asked. Jack Thornton walked into Harold's bank one day, and he smiled at me like I was a real person, not just an ornament on Harold's arm. We started talking, innocent at first, then not so innocent. I knew it was wrong, but I could not stop myself. For the first time in years, I felt alive. When he said he was leaving Fort Collins and asked me to come with him, I did not even think. I just went. "Do you regret it?" Katherine looked down at Sarah, who was playing with a wooden spoon on a blanket nearby. "I regret trusting Jack. I regret not seeing him for what he was. But I do not regret leaving Harold, and I certainly do not regret my daughter. Does that make me a terrible person?" "It makes you human," Ethan replied. "We all make choices we regret. The question is what we do after." "And what have you done after your regrets, Mr. Foster?" It was the first time she had turned the conversation back on him, and Ethan found himself answering honestly. "I've tried to be better than I was. My father was a good man, but he died young, and my mother did not survive the grief. I was angry for a long time, angry at God and the world and everyone in it. I made a lot of bad choices, got into fights, drank too much, worked for some men who were not particular about whether their cattle had brands that matched their own, if you take my meaning." Katherine's eyebrows rose slightly. "You were a cattle rustler for a few months," Ethan admitted. "Until I realized that the anger was going to get me killed or put in prison. A rancher named Samuel Gray caught me trying to steal from his herd. Instead of shooting me or turning me in, he offered me a job. He said everyone deserves a second chance, and he would be a hypocrite if he did not offer me the same grace someone had once offered him. He sounds like a good man. He was. He died last year, heart gave out. Before he passed, he told me to remember that it is never too late to choose to be better. So I came north, found work with Mr. Carter, and I have been trying to live up to Samuel's faith in me ever since." Katherine smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face. "Maybe we are both just trying to be better than we were." "Maybe," Ethan agreed. "Or maybe we are already better than the town gives us credit for." As summer turned to fall, Ethan and Katherine's friendship deepened. He started finding reasons to visit her cabin, always with some excuse about needing mending done or wanting to check on the quality of the laundry. Katherine saw through his excuses but never called him on them, and gradually he became a regular presence in her life. He brought supplies from town when she could not face the hostility of the shops. He repaired the loose boards on her cabin walls and fixed her sagging roof before the winter snows came. He sat with Sarah while Katherine worked, making faces that caused the baby to giggle and reach for him with her small hands. And slowly, without either of them quite meaning it to happen, friendship began to shift into something deeper. It was late October when Ethan finally admitted to himself that he was in love with her. He was sitting in her cabin, watching her rock Sarah to sleep, and the firelight caught in her auburn hair, turning it to flame. She was humming softly, some lullaby he did not recognize, and her face was soft with maternal love. In that moment, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to spend the rest of his life seeing that exact expression, being part of the small family Katherine had built from the ruins of her mistakes. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like coming home. Katherine looked up and caught him staring. "What?" she asked softly, careful not to wake Sarah. "Nothing," Ethan said. "Just thinking." About what? He could have lied. Should have lied, probably. But Samuel Gray's voice echoed in his head, reminding him that courage was not about never being afraid. It was about doing the right thing despite the fear. "About how I do not want to leave tonight," he said quietly. "About how every time I have to go back to the ranch, it feels a little bit harder. About how when I am not here, I am thinking about being here." Katherine's hands stilled on the rocking chair. "Ethan," she whispered, and it was the first time she had used his given name. "I know I have no right," he continued. "I know your life is complicated and the town already despises you, and the last thing you need is another man making promises he might not keep. But Katherine, I need you to know that I care about you. More than care. I am in love with you." Silence filled the cabin, broken only by the crackle of the fire and Sarah's soft breathing. Katherine carefully stood, carrying the sleeping baby to her cradle and tucking her in. When she turned back to Ethan, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You do not know what you are saying," she said. "You do not know what you would be taking on. The town already treats you differently because you help me. If you were to court me openly, to actually be with me, they would destroy you. You would lose your job, your standing, everything." "Then I would lose it," Ethan said, standing to face her. "Katherine, I have had a job before and I will have jobs again. Standing in a town that treats you the way this one does is not worth having. But you are worth everything. You and Sarah both. You barely know us. I know enough. I know you are strong and brave and loving. I know you would do anything for your daughter. I know you make me want to be a better man than I am. That seems like enough to build on." Katherine closed her eyes and a tear slipped down her cheek. "I am so tired of being alone," she whispered. "I am so tired of carrying everything by myself. But Ethan, I cannot let you sacrifice yourself for me. It would not be fair." He crossed the small space between them, gently wiping the tear from her face. "What if I am not sacrificing anything? What if I am choosing the thing I want most in the world?" She opened her eyes, searching his face. "What if I hurt you the way I hurt Harold? What if I am not capable of being the woman you think I am? You left Harold because he was hurting you, and you have spent every day since then proving that you are stronger than anyone gave you credit for. I am not asking you to be anyone other than who you are right now, Katherine Langley. This brave, fierce, wonderful woman standing in front of me. I have a child from another man. You have a daughter who deserves all the love in the world, and I would be honored to help you give her that." Katherine's breath caught, and then she was crying in earnest, and Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her while she shook with sobs that sounded like they had been building for months. He stroked her hair and murmured soft words, and gradually the crying subsided, leaving her hiccuping against his chest. "I am sorry," she mumbled into his shirt. "I did not mean to fall apart like that." "You are allowed to fall apart sometimes," Ethan said gently. "You have been holding yourself together for so long. It is all right to let someone else help carry the weight." She pulled back just enough to look up at him, her green eyes red and puffy but clearer than he had ever seen them. "Are you sure? Are you absolutely certain you want us?" "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." Katherine took a shaky breath and then she smiled, a real, full smile that made his heart skip. "Then yes. Yes, I want this too. I want you." Ethan cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, slow and gentle, pouring everything he felt into that single moment. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, and it felt like a promise, like a beginning, like coming home after a long journey. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Katherine laughed softly. "The town is going to lose their minds. Let them. Ethan replied. "I do not care what they think anymore. You say that now. I will say it tomorrow too, and the day after that. And every day for the rest of our lives if you will let me." Catherine's expression grew serious. "I need you to understand what you are choosing. It is not just the town's judgment. Harold will hear about this. He still lives here, still works at the bank. He has made it clear that he considers me a personal embarrassment. If you align yourself with me, he will make your life difficult." "I have dealt with difficult men before," Ethan said. "I am not afraid of Harold Langley." "You should be," Katherine said quietly. "He is not a good man, Ethan. He presents well, but underneath, there is cruelty. When I left him, he told me I would regret it for the rest of my life. He has made sure that every door in this town is closed to me. He will do the same to you." "Then we will find new doors," Ethan replied firmly. "Katherine, I am not saying this will be easy. I am not promising that there will not be hard times ahead. But I am promising that I will face them with you, not leave you to face them alone. That is what love is it not? Choosing someone and then choosing them again, every single day." Catherine's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of joy rather than grief. "I did not think men like you existed. I thought Jack was as good as it got, and look how that turned out." "Jack was a fool," Ethan said. "He had something precious and he threw it away. I will not make the same mistake." They stood together in the firelight, holding each other, until Sarah woke with a small cry. Katherine went to tend to her daughter, and Ethan banked the fire and prepared to leave, though everything in him wanted to stay. It would not be proper, not yet, not until they were married. The thought stopped him cold. Marriage. Was he really thinking about marriage? As if reading his thoughts, Katherine looked up from nursing Sarah. "You do not have to marry me," she said quietly. "I know my reputation is already ruined. If you want to court me without that level of commitment, I would understand." "I want to marry you," Ethan heard himself say. "Not right away, not until you are ready. But Katherine, I am not interested in half measures. When I commit to something, I commit fully. That is what I am offering you. Everything I have, everything I am." Catherine's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Then I accept, but let us take our time, let us be sure." "Fair enough," Ethan agreed. He kissed her forehead and then Sarah's soft hair before heading for the door. "I will see you tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Katherine confirmed. As Ethan rode back to the Carter ranch through the cold October night, he felt lighter than he had in years. He had found something worth fighting for, worth choosing over and over again. The town could judge all they wanted. He had made his choice, and he would never look back. The next morning, Douglas Carter was waiting for Ethan when he came down to breakfast. The older man's expression was grave, and Ethan knew immediately that news of his relationship with Katherine had already spread. "My wife heard from Mrs. Henderson that you were seen entering Katherine Langley's cabin at sunset yesterday and did not leave until well past dark," Douglas said without preamble. "Care to explain?" "I am courting Mrs. Langley," Ethan said simply. "With honorable intentions." Douglas sighed heavily. "Ethan, I warned you. I told you what would happen if you continued to associate with that woman. With respect, sir, that woman has a name, Katherine, and yes, you warned me. I chose to ignore that warning. You are throwing your future away." "No, sir, I am building my future. Just not the future you think I should have." The older rancher studied him for a long moment. "You really care for her." "I love her," Ethan said. "And I love her daughter. I intend to marry her if she will have me. The town will never accept this. Harold Langley is already making noise at the bank, calling you a fool and worse. His friends are saying you must have been taken in by a seductress, that Katherine has worked some kind of feminine wiles on you." Ethan felt anger flare hot in his chest. "Katherine has done nothing but try to survive and raise her child. If the town wants to paint her as a villain, that says more about them than it does about her. Maybe so, Douglas agreed, but that does not change the reality of the situation. Ethan, I like you. You are a hard worker, and you have got integrity, which is more than I can say for most men your age. But I have a business to run, and that business depends on good relationships with the town. If I continue to employ you while you are openly courting Katherine Langley, there will be consequences. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Are you firing me, sir? I am giving you a choice, Douglas said heavily. End your relationship with Mrs. Langley and continue working here, or continue the relationship and find employment elsewhere. I am sorry, Ethan. I truly am. But I have to think of my family and my ranch. For a moment, Ethan considered fighting it, arguing that Douglas was being unfair, but he could see the genuine regret in the older man's eyes. Douglas was not being cruel, he was being practical. In the end, he had to protect his own interests. I understand, sir, Ethan said quietly. And I choose Katherine. Douglas nodded slowly. I figured you would say that. I have prepared your wages through the end of the week, plus a little extra. It is not much, but it should tide you over while you look for other work. Thank you, sir. I appreciate everything you have done for me. I am sorry it had to end this way, Douglas said. For what it is worth, I think you are making the right choice. Not the easy one, but the right one. Katherine Langley is lucky to have found a man like you. I am the lucky one, Ethan replied. He packed his few belongings and collected his wages, then rode into town to tell Katherine what had happened. He found her hanging laundry behind her cabin, Sarah sleeping in a basket nearby. When she saw his face, her expression immediately shifted to concern. What is wrong? I lost my job, Ethan said. Mr. Carter gave me a choice between you and the ranch. I chose you. Katherine's face went pale. No, oh no, Ethan. You should have chosen the job. You need work, you need income. I am not worth losing that over. He dismounted and took her hands in his. You are worth more than any job, and I will find other work. There are ranches all over Colorado. Someone will hire me. Not if Harold has anything to say about it, Katherine said bitterly. He has connections everywhere. Once word spreads that you were fired for courting me, no respectable rancher will touch you. Then I will work for ranchers who are not respectable, Ethan replied. Or I will start my own spread. Katherine, we will figure this out, together. But Katherine was already shaking her head, pulling her hands free. You need to go. You need to tell Mr. Carter you made a mistake, that you will stop seeing me. It is not too late to fix this. I am not going to do that. Ethan, please. Her voice broke on his name. I cannot be responsible for ruining another man's life. I did that to Harold when I left him, and I will not do it to you. You did not ruin Harold's life, Ethan said firmly. Harold is fine. He still has his job and his standing and his pride, even if his pride is wounded. What you did was save your own life, Katherine. There is a difference. The end result is the same. People get hurt when they are involved with me. I am not hurt. I am happy. Happier than I have been in years. Do you not see that? Katherine's eyes filled with tears. I see a good man throwing away his future because he thinks he loves me. But Ethan, love is not enough. You need to eat. You need a place to sleep. You need a life that does not revolve around being shunned and scorned. What I need is you, Ethan said. Everything else is just details. They stood in tense silence, Katherine's laundry flapping on the line behind her in the autumn wind. Finally, she sighed, exhaustion clear on her face. You are the most stubborn man I have ever met. I have been told that before, Ethan said with a slight smile. Usually right before I prove everyone wrong. Despite herself, Katherine smiled back. What are we going to do? If you cannot find work in Fort Collins, how will you survive? I have some money saved. Enough for a few months if I am careful. And I have been thinking about buying some land, starting my own small ranch. It would not be much at first, but it would be ours. Yours and mine and Sarah's. Ours, Katherine repeated softly as though testing the word. I like the sound of that. So do I. She stepped into his arms and he held her close, feeling the tension slowly leave her body. I am scared, she admitted against his chest. I am scared this is all going to fall apart like everything else. Then we will pick up the pieces and start again, Ethan said. But Katherine, I do not think it is going to fall apart. I think we are building something strong, something that can weather whatever the town throws at us. I hope you are right. I am, Ethan said with more confidence than he felt. You will see. Over the next few weeks, Ethan learned just how difficult it was going to be to build a life in Fort Collins while courting Katherine. He went to every ranch within a day's ride, looking for work. Some turned him away at the door once they heard his name. Others listened to his pitch, before informing him that they did not need any hands at the moment, their eyes sliding away from his with obvious discomfort. Harold Langley, it seemed, had been busy spreading word of Ethan's poor judgment and questionable character. The banker had friends throughout the region, and those friends made sure that Ethan's reputation preceded him everywhere he went. After 2 weeks of rejection, Ethan was running low on funds and patience. He sat in Katherine's cabin one evening, watching her mend a shirt while Sarah played at his feet with her wooden blocks. The domestic scene should have filled him with contentment, but instead he felt the weight of responsibility settling heavy on his shoulders. I am going to have to leave Fort Collins, he said abruptly. Head further south, maybe down to New Mexico territory. Find work where Harold's influence does not reach. Katherine's hand stilled on her mending. Leave? For how long? As long as it takes to earn enough money to buy land. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year. A year, Katherine repeated, her voice hollow. You would be gone a whole year. I would come back, Ethan said quickly. Every few months, whenever I could, and I would send money for you and Sarah. But Katherine, I cannot find work here. I have to go where the work is. She set down the mending, her expression unreadable. So you are leaving, not permanently, just until I have enough saved to start our ranch. That is what Jack said, Katherine said quietly. He said he was just going to scout ahead, find us a place to live. He would send for me, he said. I never heard from him again. Ethan felt like he had been punched in the gut. I am not Jack, I will come back. How do I know that? How do I know you will not get down to New Mexico and realize your life is easier without a fallen woman and her bastard child weighing you down? Because I love you, Ethan said, moving to kneel in front of her chair. Because every breath I take, I am thinking about you and Sarah. Because I would rather die than be the kind of man who abandons the people he loves. Katherine's eyes were bright with tears. I want to believe you. I do. But I am so scared, Ethan. I am scared that if you leave, you will not come back. I am scared that I am going to be alone again. He took her hands in his, holding them tight. Then come with me. Katherine blinked, surprised. What? Come with me. You and Sarah, we will go south together, find work together, start fresh somewhere that Harold Langley's name means nothing. Ethan, I cannot just pack up and leave. I have work here, people who depend on me for their mending and washing. People who treat you like dirt, Ethan countered. People who will not even look you in the eye. Katherine, what is keeping you in Fort Collins? Really? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again, her brow furrowing. I suppose nothing, but it is Sarah's home. It is where she was born. She is 6 months old. She will not remember it. We can give her a new home, a better one. Somewhere you are not treated like a pariah for making the choice to leave a man who was cruel to you. Katherine looked down at Sarah, who had abandoned her blocks and was pulling herself up on Ethan's leg, her chubby fists clutching his pants. The baby was getting stronger every day, would be walking soon. She deserved better than growing up in a town where her mother was scorned and her very existence was considered shameful. "Where would we go?" Katherine asked slowly. "Santa Fe," Ethan said, the plan forming as he spoke. "I have heard there is work there and land for sale at reasonable prices. We could make a fresh start. Get married properly, give Sarah a father who chooses to be there." "Get married," Katherine repeated. "Ethan, you have only known me for a few months." "I have known you long enough to know I want to spend my life with you. Is that not enough?" She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing the risk, calculating all the ways this could go wrong. Finally, she nodded slowly. "All right. Yes, let us go to Santa Fe. Let us start over." Relief and joy flooded through Ethan in equal measure. He pulled Katherine to her feet and kissed her, deep and full of promise. Sarah made a small squawk of protest at being momentarily ignored, and they broke apart laughing. "When do we leave?" Katherine asked. "As soon as we can get ready. A week, maybe 2. We will need to sell what you cannot take with you, pack up the essentials. I will buy a wagon and supplies for the journey." "This is crazy," Katherine said, but she was smiling. "We are crazy." "Probably," Ethan agreed. "But at least we are crazy together." They spent the next 10 days preparing for their departure. Ethan sold his horse and bought a sturdy wagon and team instead, along with supplies for the journey south. Katherine sold most of her furniture and belongings, keeping only what would fit in the wagon along with essentials for Sarah. The few people who were willing to do business with her asked no questions, clearly relieved to see her leaving town. Word of their plans spread quickly through Fort Collins, and the reactions ranged from scornful to pitying. Mrs. Henderson declared it a mercy that they were leaving before they could corrupt the town's young women any further. Reverend Michaels preached a sermon about the wages of sin and the importance of choosing righteous companions. And Harold Langley, Katherine reported, had told anyone who would listen that Ethan was a con man who would abandon Katherine in the wilderness once he tired of her. The only person who seemed genuinely sorry to see Ethan go was Douglas Carter. The rancher came to find him 2 days before their planned departure, catching him at the general store. "So you are really leaving?" Douglas said. "Yes, sir. Tomorrow morning at first light." "I heard you are taking Katherine and the baby with you." "That is right." Douglas was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Good. That is good. She should not be left alone here, not with Harold spreading his poison." "I thought you did not approve of my relationship with her," Ethan said, surprised. "I did not say I did not approve," Douglas replied. "I said there would be consequences. There is a difference. For what it is worth, I think you are doing the right thing. Katherine made a mistake, but she has paid for it 10 times over. She deserves a chance to be happy." "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." Douglas reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. "This is a letter of introduction to a rancher I know down in Santa Fe, man named Samuel Rodriguez. He is a good man, fair employer. If you show him this letter, he will at least give you a chance." Ethan took the envelope, emotion tightening his throat. "I do not know what to say." "Do not say anything. Just take care of that woman and her baby. And Ethan, when you get settled, write me. Let me know how things turn out." "I will, sir. I promise." They shook hands, and Ethan felt like he was saying goodbye to more than just an employer. Douglas Carter had given him a chance when he needed it, and now he was giving him a second chance in a new place. Some men talked about Christian charity. Douglas actually lived it. The night before they left, Harold Langley showed up at Katherine's cabin. Ethan was there helping with the last of the packing, and he stepped outside to find the banker standing in the yard, his face twisted with rage. "You," Harold spat, pointing at Ethan, "you think you are some kind of hero, do you not? Rescuing the fallen woman, riding off into the sunset together." "I think I am a man who loves a woman and her child," Ethan replied evenly. "What you think does not concern me. You are a fool. Katherine is using you, just like she used that gambler. She will bleed you dry and then move on to the next mark." Ethan felt his temper rise but forced it down. This was exactly what Harold wanted, to provoke a fight that he could then use to cause more trouble. "Is there a reason you came here tonight, Mr. Langley? Or did you just want to throw around insults?" Harold's attention shifted to the cabin, where Katherine had appeared in the doorway with Sarah in her arms. His expression twisted with something ugly, something that looked almost like grief. "I gave you everything," Harold said to Katherine, his voice cracking. "A home, a position in society, security. And you threw it all away for what? A gambler who abandoned you and now this drifter who will do the same." "You gave me a cage, Harold," Katherine said quietly. "Not a home." "There is a difference. I loved you. No, you loved the idea of me, the perfect wife who would do exactly as she was told and never question you. But I am not perfect, Harold. I am human and I make mistakes and I need more than you were willing to give. So you destroyed our marriage." "Our marriage was already destroyed," Katherine replied. "I just had the courage to acknowledge it." Harold looked like he wanted to say more, but Ethan stepped forward, putting himself between the banker and Katherine. "You need to leave now, Mr. Langley. We are departing in the morning and you will never have to see or think about us again." "You are making the biggest mistake of your life," Harold said, but his voice had lost its venom. Now he just sounded tired and bitter. "Maybe," Ethan agreed, "but it is my mistake to make." Harold stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked away into the darkness. Ethan watched until he was sure the man was truly gone before turning back to Katherine. She was trembling slightly, her face pale in the lamplight. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I did not expect to see him again," Katherine said. "I thought he would be happy I was leaving." "I do not think Harold Langley is capable of being happy," Ethan observed. "But that is not your burden to carry anymore. You are free of him now. We both are." Katherine nodded, but he could see the encounter had shaken her. He guided her back inside, settling her in the rocking chair with Sarah while he made tea. They sat together in comfortable silence, the cabin slowly emptying of Katherine's life as she had known it, making room for the new life they would build together. They left Fort Collins just as the sun was rising over the eastern plains, turning the autumn grass gold. A few people were already awake and watched them go with expressions ranging from good riddance to curiosity. Ethan kept his eyes forward, guiding the wagon south out of town with Katherine beside him and Sarah sleeping in a nest of blankets behind them. As the town disappeared behind them, Katherine let out a long breath. "I thought I would feel sad," she said, "leaving my home, but all I feel is relief." "Fort Collins stopped being your home the moment they stopped seeing you as a person," Ethan replied. "We will build a better home in Santa Fe." "How long will the journey take?" "About 3 weeks, maybe 4 depending on weather and how often we need to stop for Sarah. We will take the mountain route, slower but safer." The journey south was harder than Ethan had anticipated. The weather turned cold as they climbed into the mountains, and Sarah struggled with the altitude, becoming fussy and difficult to soothe. They had to stop frequently to rest and warm her, and Ethan found himself worrying constantly about whether they had made the right decision. But Katherine never complained. She bundled Sarah in every blanket they had and sang to her daughter when she cried. She cooked meals over campfires that barely provided enough heat to keep them warm. She walked beside the wagon when the terrain got too rough, never once suggesting they should turn back. One night, about 2 weeks into their journey, they camped beside a small stream in a valley between 2 peaks. Sarah had finally settled down to sleep, and Ethan and Katherine sat close to the fire, sharing a single blanket against the cold. "You ever regret it?" Katherine asked suddenly. "Choosing me, choosing this?" Ethan looked at her, this woman who had given up everything she knew to take a chance on a future with him. Her face was dirty from the road and her hands were chapped from the cold, but to him, she had never been more beautiful. "Not for a single second," he said. "You." Katherine smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Not once. Even when I am cold and tired and Sarah will not stop crying, I look at you and I think about how lucky I am, how lucky we are. We are going to have a good life," Ethan said. "I promise you that." "I know," Katherine replied. "Because we are building it together." They reached Santa Fe on a bright November morning, the adobe buildings glowing warm in the sunshine. It was different from Fort Collins, more Hispanic in character, with a plaza at the center and a cathedral that had stood for hundreds of years. To Ethan, it felt like a place where they could disappear, where Katherine's past would not follow her and they could start fresh. He took them to an inn first, paying for a room where Katherine and Sarah could rest and clean up from the journey. Then he went to find Samuel Rodriguez, carrying Douglas Carter's letter of introduction. Rodriguez turned out to be a man in his 50s, with dark hair going gray at the temples and a ready smile. He read Douglas's letter carefully, then looked Ethan up and down with assessing eyes. "Douglas says you are a hard worker with a good character," Rodriguez said in lightly accented English. "He also says you are courting a woman with a complicated past and that you could use a fresh start. Is this true?" "Yes, sir," Ethan replied. "Her name is Katherine. She was married before to a man who mistreated her, and she left him. The town judged her for that choice and me for standing by her. We came south to find a place where we could build a life together." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "I appreciate your honesty." Many men would have left out the complicated parts. He paused, thinking. "I could use a good hand. My ranch is about 10 miles north of Santa Fe. The work is hard, but the pay is fair, and I provide housing for my men and their families. If you are willing to work, you have a job." Relief washed over Ethan so strong it almost buckled his knees. "Thank you, sir. You will not regret this." "See that I do not," Rodriguez replied with a smile. "When can you start?" "As soon as you need me." "Tomorrow morning, then. Bring your woman and her child. My wife, Alina, will help them get settled." Ethan practically ran back to the inn, bursting into their room with a huge smile. "I got a job. We have a place to live." Katherine looked up from where she was changing Sarah, and her face lit up with joy. "Really? Already?" "Mr. Rodriguez runs a ranch north of town. He is giving us housing and fair wages." "Katherine, we did it. We made it." She laughed, the sound full of relief and happiness, and threw her arms around his neck. Sarah, caught between them, let out a squeal of protest, and they separated, laughing. For the first time in months, Ethan felt the weight of worry lift from his shoulders. They had made it. Against all odds, despite everything the town of Fort Collins had thrown at them, they had built something new. The Rodriguez Ranch was nothing like the Carter spread. Where Douglas had run a large operation with multiple buildings and a dozen hands, Samuel ran a smaller, more intimate ranch with just 4 permanent employees and their families. The housing was simple but comfortable, small adobe houses with thick walls that kept out the heat in summer and the cold in winter. Alina Rodriguez was a warm, round woman who took one look at Katherine and Sarah and immediately swept them into her care. She spoke limited English, but communicated through smiles and gestures, showing Katherine where everything was and helping her settle into their new home. By the end of the first day, Katherine was laughing at Alina's jokes even when she did not understand all the words, and Sarah was content in Alina's capable arms. Ethan threw himself into the work, with the determination of a man who had something to prove. He rose before dawn and worked until after sunset, learning the particular challenges of ranching in New Mexico, which was different from Colorado in subtle but important ways. Samuel was a patient teacher, explaining things carefully and never making Ethan feel stupid for asking questions. The other ranch hands, Miguel and Carlos, were brothers from Mexico who had worked for Samuel for years. They were initially wary of Ethan, this gringo who had shown up out of nowhere with a woman and a baby. But as they saw how hard he worked and how respectful he was, they warmed to him, teaching him Spanish phrases and inviting him to share meals. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he belonged somewhere, not just tolerated or accepted out of necessity, but truly welcomed. The Rodriguez Ranch operated like a family, and he and Katherine and Sarah were being folded into that family without judgment or condition. One evening in late November, about 3 weeks after they had arrived, Ethan came home to find Katherine in their small kitchen, humming while she prepared dinner. Sarah was in a high chair that Miguel had made, banging a wooden spoon against the tray. It was such a picture of domestic contentment that Ethan had to stop in the doorway and just take it in. "What?" Katherine asked, noticing him watching. "Just thinking about how this is everything I wanted and did not know how to ask for," Ethan replied. Katherine smiled, that warm, genuine smile that still had the power to make his heart skip. "We are happy here." "We are," Ethan agreed. "Katherine, I know we said we would take our time, but I do not want to wait anymore. Will you marry me? Will you let me be Sarah's father and your husband, legally and properly?" Katherine set down the spoon she had been stirring with and crossed to him, cupping his face in her hands. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 2 weeks later in the cathedral in Santa Fe, with Samuel and Elena Rodriguez standing as witnesses. Katherine wore a simple dress that Elena had helped her make, white with blue embroidery at the cuffs and collar. Sarah, now 7 months old and starting to babble constantly, wore a matching dress and was held by Elena during the ceremony. Father Gonzalez, the priest who married them, asked no questions about Katherine's past or why they had no family present. He simply blessed their union and welcomed them into the parish community. As Ethan slipped a simple gold band onto Katherine's finger, he thought about how far they had come from that first day in Morrison's general store, when she had been buying flour with trembling hands, and he had been a stranger offering help he did not know she needed. "I love you," he whispered as they kissed to seal their vows. "I love you too," Katherine whispered back. "Thank you for choosing me." "Thank you for letting me," Ethan replied. That night, in their adobe house on the Rodriguez Ranch, they celebrated their marriage with a quiet dinner that Elena had prepared. Sarah went to sleep early, worn out from the excitement of the day, and Ethan and Katherine sat together on their small porch, watching the stars come out over the New Mexico landscape. "I used to think I had ruined my life," Katherine said quietly. "When I left Harold and Jack abandoned me, I thought I had made choices so terrible that I would never recover from them. But sitting here now, married to you with Sarah safe and fed and loved, I realize I did not ruin my life. I saved it." "You did," Ethan agreed. "You saved yourself, and in doing so, you led me to exactly where I needed to be. Do you think we will be happy here, long term?" "I think we will be happy anywhere as long as we are together." Katherine leaned against him and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and closer by, cattle lowed softly in their pens. It was the sound of home, of safety, of a future they were building together. The next year passed in a blur of work and joy and the small challenges of daily life. Ethan continued to work for Samuel Rodriguez, saving every penny he could spare toward buying their own land. Katherine took in sewing from the women in Santa Fe, building a small but steady income of her own. Sarah grew from a baby into a toddler, learning to walk and then to run, her laughter filling their small house with light. They attended Mass regularly at the cathedral and gradually became part of the Santa Fe community. The other parishioners accepted them without question, this young couple and their daughter, never asking about where they had come from or what had brought them to New Mexico. In Santa Fe, with its mix of Hispanic and Anglo settlers, its history of complicated families and second chances, they were just another family trying to make their way. In the spring of 1880, Samuel Rodriguez called Ethan into his office with an interesting proposition. There was a piece of land adjacent to his ranch, about 200 acres, that was coming up for sale. The owner had died with no heirs, and the territorial government was selling it off. Samuel wanted to know if Ethan would be interested in buying it with his help. "I will loan you the money for the land and the initial stock," Samuel explained. "You can pay me back over time with interest but nothing excessive. I want good neighbors, Ethan, and you and Katherine have become like family to Alina and me. This way you can have your own ranch while still being close enough that we can help each other." Ethan was stunned. "Sir, that is incredibly generous. I do not know what to say." "Say yes," Samuel replied with a smile. "You have earned this, my friend. You work harder than any man I have ever employed, and you have a good heart. Build your ranch, raise your family, and let us be neighbors and friends." Ethan talked it over with Katherine that night, laying out the numbers and the work it would require. She listened carefully, asking smart questions about finances and timeline, and then smiled. "Let us do it," she said. "Let us build our own place, the Foster Ranch." "The Foster Ranch," Ethan repeated, liking the sound of it. "What do you think, Sarah? Should we have our own ranch?" Sarah, who was nearly 2 now and talking in full sentences, clapped her hands. "Ranch, cows," they all laughed, and Ethan felt a surge of gratitude so strong it almost overwhelmed him. 2 years ago he had been a ranch hand with nothing but a horse and his determination. Now he was a husband and a father with the opportunity to own land, to build something permanent and lasting over the next few months. With Samuel's loan and help from Miguel and Carlos, Ethan built a small ranch house on his new land. It was modest, just 3 rooms, but it was theirs. Katherine planted a garden and hung curtains in the windows. Sarah had her own small bedroom, painted yellow like sunshine. They moved into their new house in July of 1880, and that first night, lying in their own bed in their own home on their own land, Ethan felt like the richest man in the world. "We did it," Katherine whispered in the darkness. "We really did it." "We did," Ethan agreed, "and this is just the beginning." The Foster Ranch started small with just 20 head of cattle and 2 horses. But Ethan worked tirelessly, building corrals and fences, digging a well, creating all the infrastructure a working ranch needed. Katherine worked just as hard, tending her garden and her chickens, cooking and cleaning and managing the household finances with careful precision. Sarah grew up knowing nothing but love and security, a happy child who chased chickens and helped her mother in the garden and rode in front of her father on his horse. She had no memory of Fort Collins or the cabin where she had been born, no understanding of the judgment and scorn her mother had endured. To Sarah, her life was simple and good, and that was exactly what Katherine and Ethan wanted for her. In the fall of 1881, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. She told Ethan over breakfast one morning, her eyes shining with joy and a little bit of fear. "Another baby," Ethan said, his voice full of wonder. "Sarah is going to be a big sister." "Are you happy?" Katherine asked. I know we are just getting the ranch established and money is tight." "I am thrilled," Ethan replied honestly. "This ranch, this life, it is all for our family. The bigger the family, the more meaning it has." Their son, whom they named James Samuel Foster after no one in particular but good solid names they both liked, was born in May of 1882. He was a healthy, loud baby who demanded attention and got it. Sarah was initially jealous of the interloper who took so much of her mother's time, but gradually she warmed to her baby brother, helping Katherine with small tasks and singing him songs she made up herself. The years continued to pass, each one building on the last. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Ethan bought more cattle, hired a hand to help with the work, built an addition onto the house to accommodate their growing family. Katherine's sewing business expanded as she became known in Santa Fe for her skill with a needle. They were not rich by any means, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. Samuel and Alina Rodriguez remained close friends and neighbors, sharing holidays and helping each other through the inevitable challenges of ranching life. Miguel and Carlos both married and started families of their own, their children growing up alongside Sarah and James. The community they had found in New Mexico was everything Fort Collins had not been: accepting and supportive, and built on mutual respect rather than judgment. In 1885, when Sarah was 7 and James was 3, a letter arrived from Colorado. It was from Douglas Carter, the first communication Ethan had received from Fort Collins since they had left 7 years earlier. His hands shook slightly as he opened it, uncertain what news it might contain. Douglas wrote that he was getting older and thinking about his legacy. He wanted Ethan to know that he had never regretted giving him that letter of introduction to Samuel Rodriguez. He had heard through various channels that Ethan and Katherine were thriving in New Mexico, building a successful ranch and a strong family. He was proud of Ethan for making the hard choice and sticking with it, and he wanted Ethan to know that he had been right all along. Love and integrity mattered more than reputation. The letter went on to say that Fort Collins had changed in the years since they left. Harold Langley had been caught embezzling from his bank and had fled town in disgrace. Many of the people who had been so quick to judge, Katherine now spoke of her with something approaching regret, recognizing too late that they had driven out a woman who had committed no crime beyond choosing her own happiness. "He says the town has changed," Ethan told Katherine that evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in shades of orange and pink. "That people regret how they treated you." Katherine was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, she shook her head. "It does not matter anymore. That was a different life, a different person. I am not the scared, shamed woman I was in Fort Collins. I am Katherine Foster, rancher's wife and mother of 2. This is my life now, and I would not trade it for anything. Not even for the town's belated approval. Especially not for that," Katherine said firmly. "We did not need their approval then, and we certainly do not need it now. We built this life ourselves without them. That is worth more than 1,000 apologies." Ethan smiled, pulling her close. "I love you. Have I mentioned that recently?" "Not in the last hour," Katherine teased. "You are falling down on the job, Mr. Foster." "Then let me rectify that immediately. I love you, Mrs. Foster. I loved you when you were scorned and shunned in Fort Collins, and I love you now in the life we have built together. I will love you every day for the rest of our lives, and I will never, not for a single moment, regret the choice I made to stand by you." Katherine's eyes filled with tears, the happy kind. "You saved my life, you know. When you helped me that day in Morrison's store, you gave me hope that not everyone in the world was cruel, and every day since, you have proven that hope was justified. You saved mine too." Ethan replied. I was drifting before I met you, working but not really living. You gave me purpose, a reason to be better than I was. We saved each other, Katherine. That is what love does. They sat together as the stars began to appear, comfortable in each other's company after 7 years of marriage. Inside the house, they could hear Sarah reading aloud to James, her voice carrying through the open window. It was an ordinary evening, nothing special or remarkable, but it was theirs, built from choices and courage and a refusal to let the world dictate their worth. The years continued their steady march forward. Sarah grew into an intelligent young woman who loved books and horses in equal measure. James became a sturdy, cheerful boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the ways of ranching and dreaming of the day he would run the Foster Ranch himself. In 1888, Katherine gave birth to their third child, a daughter they named Alina after their dear friend. The Rodriguez matriarch had passed away the previous year, and naming their daughter after her was a way of honoring the woman who had welcomed them so completely into her life and heart. Samuel Rodriguez, now in his 70s, gradually turned over more of his ranch operations to Miguel and Carlos, who had become partners rather than just employees. He spent much of his time at the Foster Ranch, teaching young James the finer points of cattle management and entertaining baby Alina with stories from his youth. He told Ethan once that they had become the family he and Alina had never been able to have, and that his greatest pride was seeing how they had flourished. The Foster Ranch continued to grow and prosper. By 1890, they had nearly 200 head of cattle and had built a reputation for quality stock that stretched throughout New Mexico territory. Ethan hired 2 more hands to help with the work, and Katherine's sewing business had expanded to the point where she employed 3 women from Santa Fe to help her keep up with the orders. They were, by any measure, successful. But more than that, they were happy. Their children were healthy and loved. Their marriage was strong, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. They had friends and community, and a place in the world that they had earned through hard work and determination. One evening in the late summer of 1892, Ethan and Katherine sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Sarah was 15 now, beautiful and bright, already being courted by several young men from Santa Fe, much to her father's consternation. James was 10, all elbows and energy and enthusiasm. Alina was 4, a serious little girl who loved helping her mother in the garden. All 3 children were inside, supposedly getting ready for bed but more likely engaged in whatever mischief they could devise. Ethan could hear Sarah's laughter and James's protest and Alina's high-pitched squeal, and he smiled. "This is everything I never knew I wanted," he said to Katherine. "This life, this family, this place. I would not change a single thing." Katherine took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture as familiar as breathing. "Remember when you said you chose me and would never look back? I remember. In Fort Collins when I helped you buy flour. You kept that promise," Katherine said softly. "In all these years, through everything we have faced, you never once looked back. You never regretted choosing me." "How could I?" Ethan replied. "Choosing you was choosing life. Everything good in my world came from that single decision to help a woman buy groceries. You, Sarah, James, Alina, this ranch, our friends, all of it stems from that moment." "The town shunned me for my choices," Katherine said, echoing words she had spoken long ago. "But you chose me anyway. You gave me back my life, Ethan. You gave me a future when I thought I had none." "We gave each other a future," Ethan corrected gently. "I was lost too, remember, drifting from job to job, never belonging anywhere. You gave me a home, Katherine, a reason to put down roots and build something lasting." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of their children inside and the gentle evening sounds of the ranch around them. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses shuffling in the stable, the wind rustling through the cottonwood trees Katherine had planted years ago. It was the sound of home, of a life well lived, of choices made and never regretted. "What do you think would have happened if you had not helped me that day?" Katherine asked suddenly. "If you had just let Martha Morrison turn me away?" Ethan considered the question seriously. "I think you would have survived. You are strong enough, stubborn enough. You would have found another way. But I also think we both would have been lonelier. I would still be a ranch hand somewhere, working for someone else and never knowing what I was missing. And you would still be in Fort Collins, alone and scorned, fighting every day just to keep going. Instead, we are here," Katherine said, "together, with 3 beautiful children and a ranch and a life beyond anything I dreamed was possible." "Instead, we are here," Ethan agreed. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her dark auburn hair, so like her mother's, falling around her shoulders. "Papa, James says he does not have to go to bed because ranch hands do not have bedtimes. Can you please explain to him that he is not a ranch hand, he is a 10-year-old boy?" Ethan chuckled, standing up. "I suppose I should handle that." "I suppose you should," Katherine agreed with a smile. As Ethan went inside to corral his children and convince them that bedtime was indeed non-negotiable, Katherine remained on the porch, looking out over the land they had built together. 14 years ago, she had been a desperate woman in a hostile town, trying to buy flour with trembling hands and wondering how she would survive. Now she was Katherine Foster, wife and mother and businesswoman, surrounded by love and security and community. The town had shunned her for her choices. It was true. They had judged her and scorned her and tried to break her spirit. But in doing so, they had driven her to this life, to this man who had chosen her when no one else would, to this family and this ranch and this future. She did not forgive Fort Collins for their cruelty, but she could acknowledge that their judgment, painful as it was, had led her to exactly where she needed to be. Sometimes the worst things that happened to you ended up being the catalyst for the best things. You just had to have the courage to keep moving forward, to believe that better days were possible. Ethan returned to the porch, having successfully herded all 3 children into their beds. He settled back into his chair with a sigh of contentment, and Katherine reached for his hand again. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For seeing me when everyone else looked away. For choosing me when I had been rejected by everyone else. For loving me and Sarah and building this life with me. For keeping every promise you ever made. For never looking back." Ethan raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done, Katherine. Everything else, the ranch, the success, the family, that took work. But loving you, that was as natural as breathing from the very first moment." They sat together as the moon rose over the New Mexico landscape, 2 people who had found each other at the exact moment they both needed finding. The town had shunned her, yes, but the cowboy had chosen her anyway. And in doing so, he had chosen a future neither of them could have imagined. A life built on love and second chances and the courage to keep moving forward no matter what obstacles stood in the way. Years later, when Sarah married a kind young rancher from a neighboring spread, Katherine stood in the cathedral in Santa Fe and remembered her own wedding in that same place. She had been so uncertain then, so afraid that happiness was something she did not deserve. But Ethan had shown her, through 15 years of steady love and partnership, that everyone deserved happiness. Everyone deserved a second chance. Everyone deserved to be chosen. When James took over operations of the Foster Ranch in 1902, Ethan and Katherine were able to step back and enjoy the fruits of their decades of labor. They spent their days working in Katherine's expanded garden, riding out to check on the cattle not because they had to, but because they wanted to, and spoiling their grandchildren with the enthusiasm of people who knew how precious family truly was. Samuel Rodriguez passed away in 1905 at the age of 82, surrounded by the extended family he had built through kindness and generosity. At his funeral, Ethan spoke about how Samuel had given them a chance when they needed it most, how his willingness to look past prejudice and see people for who they truly were had changed the course of multiple lives. Miguel and Carlos both wept openly, and Katherine held Ethan's hand, remembering the scared woman she had been when she first arrived in Santa Fe and the warmth with which Samuel and Alina had welcomed her. Alina Foster, their youngest, grew up to be a teacher, opening a small school in Santa Fe where she taught reading and arithmetic to children of all backgrounds. She had inherited her mother's fierce sense of justice and her father's steady kindness, and she used both to create opportunities for children who might otherwise have been overlooked. In 1915, Ethan and Katherine celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary. They were in their 50s now, their hair shot through with gray, their hands roughened by decades of work. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had chosen each other in Fort Collins all those years ago, who had taken a chance on love when the world told them it was foolish. They had 8 grandchildren now, a rowdy bunch who ran through the ranch house with the same energy their own children once had. Sarah had given them 4 grandchildren, James 3, and Alina 1 with another on the way. The Foster name was well established in New Mexico, synonymous with fair dealing and hard work and strong family values. On their anniversary evening, after all the grandchildren had been collected by their parents and the house was finally quiet, Ethan and Katherine sat once more on their porch. It had been rebuilt and expanded over the years, but it was still their favorite place, the spot where they had shared thousands of conversations and watched countless sunsets. "You ever think about Fort Collins?" Ethan asked. "About what our lives would have been like if we had stayed?" "Sometimes," Katherine admitted, "but not with regret, more with gratitude that we had the courage to leave to choose each other over everyone else's expectations." "I received another letter from Douglas Carter last month," Ethan said. "Did I tell you?" "No, how is he?" "Retired now, living with his daughter in Denver. He said he still thinks about us sometimes, wonders if we are as happy as he hoped we would be." I wrote back and told him we are happier than either of us ever thought possible. Katherine smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling in a way Ethan found endlessly endearing. "That is the truth. We have been blessed, Ethan, not just with material success, though that is nice too, but with love and family and a life built on our own terms. You know what I think about most?" Ethan said, "That day in Morrison's store when I helped you buy flour, I almost did not do it. I saw you and I saw the way people were treating you, and part of me thought it would be easier to just mind my own business. But something pushed me forward, some instinct that said this woman needs help and you can give it." "I am glad you listened to that instinct," Katherine said softly. "So am I. Because in that moment, I chose the path that led to everything good in my life. Every single good thing traces back to that choice to help a woman buy groceries. The town shunned me for my choices," Katherine said, repeating again the phrase that had defined so much of her early life. "They made me feel worthless and shameful and beyond redemption. But you saw something in me worth choosing. You gave me back my dignity when I thought I had lost it forever." "You never lost it," Ethan replied. "They tried to take it from you, but you held on to it. That is what I saw that day, Katherine. not a fallen woman or a shameful scandal. Just a strong, brave person doing her best to survive in a world that was treating her cruelly. How could I not help? How could I not love you? Tears slipped down Catherine's cheeks, but she was smiling. I love you so much. After all these years, after everything we have been through, I love you more now than I did on our wedding day. That is because our love has been tested and proven, Ethan said. We did not just promise to love each other in the easy times. We chose each other in the hard times, when it would have been simpler to walk away. That kind of love, the kind that is forged in fire, that is the kind that lasts. They sat together as the stars emerged, as they had done thousands of times before and would do thousands of times again. The ranch was quiet around them, the cattle settled for the night, the horses dozing in their stalls. Inside the house, photographs lined the walls, chronicling a life lived fully and joyfully. Weddings and births and holidays and everyday moments, all captured and preserved. This was their legacy, Ethan thought. Not just the ranch or the successful business or the children and grandchildren, but the proof that love, real love, the kind that chose someone despite what the world said, that love could overcome anything. They had faced judgment and poverty and uncertainty, and they had emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. The town had shunned her for her choices. But the cowboy had chosen her anyway, and he had never, not for a single moment, looked back. And in making that choice and standing by her when no one else would, he had found the thing he had been searching for his entire life. Home, family, purpose, love. 33 years after that first encounter in Morrison's general store, Ethan Foster looked at his wife and knew with absolute certainty that he would make the same choice again. He would help her buy flour, he would defend her against Harold Langley, he would lose his job and leave everything behind. He would do it all again in a heartbeat, because every step of that difficult journey had led them here, to this porch, to this life, to this love that had withstood every test. No regrets? Katherine asked, as if reading his thoughts. Not a single one, Ethan replied. You? Only that I did not meet you sooner, Katherine said with a smile. But then again, maybe we both needed to walk our difficult paths so we could appreciate what we found when we finally met. Maybe, Ethan agreed. Or maybe we were always meant to find each other and Fort Collins was just the place where our paths finally crossed. Either way, I am grateful, Katherine said. For you, for our family, for this life. The town shunned me, but you chose me. And that choice changed everything. For both of us, Ethan said. For all of us. As they sat together in the gathering darkness, their hands intertwined, they were surrounded by everything they had built. The ranch that had started with nothing and grown into something substantial. The children who had become good, kind adults. The grandchildren who would carry the Foster name into the next generation. The community they had found in New Mexico, so different from the one that had rejected them in Colorado. But more than any of that, they had each other. After 33 years of marriage, through everything life had thrown at them, they still chose each other every single day. The town had tried to define Katherine by her mistakes, to reduce her to nothing more than a scandal and a shame. But Ethan had seen past all of that to the woman underneath, and in choosing her, he had given her the chance to become who she was always meant to be: strong, successful, loved, a wife, a mother, a businesswoman, a pillar of her community. Not despite her past, but having integrated it into the story of who she was. Katherine Foster had made mistakes and survived them. She had been judged and overcome it. She had been abandoned and found love anyway. Her story was not one of shame, but one of redemption and resilience, and the power of being chosen. And Ethan, who had been drifting before he met her, had found in Katherine his anchor. She had given him purpose and family, and a reason to be better than he might otherwise have been. In choosing her, he had chosen the best version of himself, the man who stood up for what was right even when it was hard, who kept his promises no matter the cost, who loved with his whole heart and never wavered. Together, they had proven that love, real love, was stronger than judgment. That choosing someone and standing by them could change the course of multiple lives. That second chances were not just possible but beautiful, leading to futures that neither person could have imagined alone. The town had shunned her for her choices. The cowboy had chosen her anyway and never looked back once. And in that choice, in that unwavering commitment, they had built something extraordinary. A love story for the ages, played out not in grand gestures but in daily choices to show up for each other, to work side by side, to raise a family and build a life and create a legacy worth leaving. As the moon rose high over the New Mexico landscape, Ethan and Katherine Foster sat together on their porch, two people who had found in each other everything they needed. The world had tried to tell them their love was wrong, that they were making a mistake. But 14,000 days of marriage had proven the world wrong. Their love was not a mistake. It was the truest, best thing either of them had ever done, and they would never, not for a single moment, regret the choices that had led them here. To this porch, this life, this love that would endure until their final days and beyond, carried on in the children and grandchildren who bore witness to what happens when someone chooses love over fear, acceptance over judgment, and a person over a town's narrow-minded opinions. The town shunned her. The cowboy chose her, and they lived happily ever after, building a life and a legacy that proved love, in the end, always wins.